Welcome back to the Paladins Pro Circuit, the PPC. It's Finch and GuhRVN, as we're now moving from North America over to Brazil. And in North America just now, we actually saw a pretty good set, even though it ended up being a 3-0 with, I think, a pretty exciting pick there with the Tiberius. Hopefully, Gore, we'll see something exciting happening here. This is Mandrake's up against Triunfo, and this should be a pretty close one. We're thinking the two best here in Brazil.
Yeah, so far, these are the teams that have kind of proven themselves. And it makes sense when you look at the lineups, you'll recognize a couple of these names from the old Space Station Gaming roster that have maybe split up and played on it. But you've got two teams that are kind of comprised of the top names that have been in Brazil in the past, coming back together to try and dominate the region. We've seen both of them do really well last week, finding 3-0s.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see them butt heads because I want to see what happens. Like, how do one of them come out on top? And then, I guess, conversely, afterward, how does the other one catch up to that?
Right. I mean, I think this could be very telling for this Brazil region, right? Is this top end as close as we all think it is? Or is it that one of these teams is maybe even a step above even their potentially next closest level of competition? I think that's what's up for debate here, right? That's what we're going to be finding out as a result of this match, is just potentially how far one of these teams are from everyone else, or if these two are going to be kind of like rivals going back and forth. So I think there's a lot to be gleaned from this match. Let's take a look back at those standings, GuhRVN. Just as you alluded to, these two teams did both get their wins on 3-0s. Now, Rao was right there with them with a win as well, though a little bit closer. They did drop one map, and then everyone else kind of struggling to try and get online here at the beginning of the season. But I think it was a tough start for some of these teams playing up against the best. We'll see how they sort of shape out as there's different matchups throughout the rest of the season.
I'll be honest, like this is one of those games that I think is most exciting in Brazil because it is kind of the two top dogs going against each other. But I think the other games are just as exciting because they finally get to play someone that's not Mandrakes or Triunfo, right? Like, it's someone that you can, like, go into this match and be like, okay, cool, we have, like, a solid chance. So I'm excited to see what those teams will be doing. But this is going to be more than likely the fight for first. This is realistically what I expect out of these two teams. Whichever one falls behind the other early on is going to be, like, right on their heels for the rest of the split. And I can't think of a better place to start it off than a map that would typically go 3-3 and keep us neck and neck the entire time than Ascension Peak.
Expecting it to be pretty close. I feel like, Gore, we don't get to see that much Ascension Peak here lately, but certainly an interesting map where I think that these two top teams can show us a little bit of what they have in store. This could be one where there's a lot of avenues to kind of move around. That whole mid area, not where the actual point is, but like the sort of larger mid area is rather open. There's a lot of different paths you can take. So I would say, GuhRVN, that this one should be telling, as Mandrakes will be in that first spot. They choose to ban away the Buck as well as the Bomb King. You still got to find room, I'm imagining, to ban something like a ROM or something like that here, Gore. Is this all what you would expect so far as the con gets taken away?
Honestly, it feels right for Ascension Peak, but it's a little just deviant from what I've expected out of these last few weeks. You know, we've seen a lot of Jenos, a lot of Furia, a lot of ROM. At least one of those guys gets put up on there. But I think Con, and he's the one that like stands out to me because we haven't seen him banned out as much. But it makes sense for him to get banned out because of how potent he can be. This isn't a map where he gets an immediate toss off the map. He can kill you down in the well, or he can walk around the side and use his ult to throw you off the edge of the map. But the control we've seen out of Khan these last few weeks, he's just so potent. He does so much for the team, and he can bring a lot of healing and damage to you as well. So he does pretty much all you want, and even though he got some significant nerfs coming into this season, he's still remained one of the top off-tanks. I like Mandrakes getting rid of him.
Yeah, I think that makes sense for Mandrakes. They're also going to make sure they pick up this Androxus. And Gore, I feel like Ascension Peak is one of those maps where Androxus can really thrive, where you can get a lot of value out of that mobility and getting around the map and finding those sight lines. So this should be strong here for Mandrakes. On the other side, though, we're going to see Barik and Ruckus. So maybe not that same strat that we were seeing some of in North America when they were relying basically on just one point tank in some of those matches. Looks like we are going to see the Barik put a point on the Ruckus and that off-tank role and the Maeve to go along with it.
Yeah, and I like this comp for this map. I mean, when it comes down to it, Barik is going to be able to dance around the statues with his turrets pretty well. Ruckus can ideally alleviate some of the pressure from that, and Maeve is going to have free roam. One of the biggest matchups I think we've seen for the last year or so on Ascension Peak was always like a Maeve versus an Evie going off to the side, and whoever won that 1v1 won the war of attrition, could loop around to the back of the team fight. Now Maeve is going to have to go up against Androxus, which might not go as easily in her favor since Andro has that hit scan potential A couple of good headshots means Maeve's out of there. That's going to be the matchup in my eyes to kind of keep our eyes on for the deciding factor in the team fight.
Wow, it's going to be the Strix to round out the draft here. So really just the one sniper is the Cassie in that same slot on the other side there for Mandrake. So, Gore, I mean, I feel like this is one of those maps where Strix can have a pretty strong performance if he is left relatively unchecked. You start to move into Ascension Peak. How do you see things rolling out or running out for that Strix in particular?
Man, snipers on this map are always really weird. And I think it might just be because when you see it in a coordinated team, it works so much better, especially a lot of these players, you know, with the ability to kind of find those snapshots. I've never been able to translate this into my games, right? I've never been able to like lock in Strix on Ascension Peak and think, yeah, this is going to be a great game for me. But the way these guys play, the angles that they take specifically is where my eyesight goes to. Because a lot of the time you'll actually see them back here, right? Nice long line of sight, a place where you're feeling safe, you have cover. But they don't mind getting aggressive and getting down to where we see some of the other DPS, typically where we'll see Cassie playing from, kind of just down below the ramps.
Oh, but Mittow gets caught out early there, Gormaz. We're just talking about the Cassie. She gets punished, but frzgod, as he often does, capitalizes on that window well, finds himself a double, removes away the Ruckus as well as the Maeve. And so on to the actual point go Mandrake's University, certainly favored now with that numbers advantage. And this is where frzgod can really start to operate when there's some space, when they can start moving up the zone with Scooter dropping as well. They take care of the Barik, and now he's truly got some room to operate, winning this first fight.
And just playing it confidently. Again, this is where Ares, I think, is going to suffer. Ares is a fantastic Maeve, but trying to go up against the Andro when you're having to hit these angled shots versus him just being able to point and click, it's going to make things a little more complicated. And in terms of mobility, he can keep up pretty well. And well, as we can see right there, he has no issue plugging some of that damage into front lines either.
You're right, and that delayed sort of death for the Barik really ends up hurting their ability to come up and contest the point. Mandrakes grab it quite easily, and now could start thinking a little bit about moving forward for this offense, but the rest of Triunfo are in position and set. Going to keep them stuck here for this mid-fight, looking for the Furia as Ares does end up trading out as Kronsz finds the shot a little bit later here, Gormizer. But I know you were talking about how sometimes Ascension Peak can kind of stall out sometimes. What are the points where things can get kind of tough when you're trying to make this push?
Well, right here so far has been a very solid point. And this is actually something like, if you're able to come back, and this happens in a lot of the maps, but on maps like this, it can be much more of a death grip, where if you lose that fight right as you capture, so you get the payload, but you don't have any pressure, you're going to stall out, because this is a wide open courtyard you're trying to push this payload through. A lot of high ground for Triunfo to fall back to. That'll give them some angles down onto you. You have to win a fight and then some to keep this payload rolling. And otherwise, you're going to see an archway about 3/4 of the way through. And that's, it might as well be a stop sign for how the way the payload goes through there. It is a pause, and very rarely do you get to see teams kind of break through. It requires a lot of flankability from your team to go back and open up the door.
Well, the Inflame committed here on the side of Mandrakes, clearly feeling as though they had some opportunity to make something happen. They don't get a ton of value. In fact, it's GuhRVN who finds the first kill. Now Owtlander, Scooter gets one too, but frzgod manages to answer back with a double kill. Gets rid of the Ruckus and the Maeve again. That's twice now he's won those battles as Dinttick ends up dropping too. So I don't know that Mandrakes can capitalize too much off the back of this. They have to wait for their Ash to get back up here as well. But they made a play, committing to Furia ultimate there, Gore. Maybe a bit surprised they don't find more.
I think they not only wanted more out of it, but I mean, if you have a good Fury ult, like you come out of that with 30% recharge, right? Like you're in a good spot. The fact that he's just now kind of charging that up will more than likely be able to get it. Well, maybe not before the next round since Owtlander gets taken down there. But like that's the hope, right? You use it there to break the chokehold, to then get it back to have it for the point fight. They managed to break the chokehold, but finish 10 seconds is nowhere near enough time to feel confident in this push right now. I'd be surprised if they throw anything else out for Mandrakes.
You're right. I doubt that this is going to be a heavy resource commitment from Mandrakes as they do start to get towards that arch, as you mentioned earlier, which can so often be the stall point. Triunfo, then, it's just a question of how efficiently can they make this defense happen, and if Mandrakes can maybe force some resources out from Triunfo and set themselves up for a better mid-fight here this next time. The Inara starts to push in. frzgod has been critical all game long, but they've lost Kronsz already. That's going to make it so much harder, and yeah, that's enough for the defense for Triunfo, and Mandrake's basically just going to head back and start thinking about this next mid-fight.
And my eyes are falling to Outlander. I only got an 87%, but hey, Furia's ult's going to be up this fight. That's always going to be important. I'm also looking towards Ares because the last mid-fight didn't have a whole lot of Maeve in it, and that's where I want to see him show up a little more. 4-4-4, so he's not really out of the game, but he hasn't been as in the game as we're seeing out of like frzgod, who's 7-3-5, right? Freeze has been playing very confidently, and it's something you expect. I mean, he's been playing flank for a long time, and he's been doing it at the top level. Again, most people would argue one of the best players in the world. I've heard a lot of players even call him best player in the world, so you have to always take it with that kind of grain of salt, whereas Ares was that flex that would kind of pick up the Maeve every now and then for SSG, but he so far hasn't been able to hold the same candle up to frzgod right now.
We can already see all those resiliences starting to come through for Triunfo. A couple of records for Mandrake as well. Try and chew through some of the shielding as GuhRVN falls early on to frzgod, who really has been the impactful player. Remember, they lost Mittow early on in this mid-fight last time, and frzgod managed to turn that into a successful trade there for the rest of the squad. So with Aspexy down as well on the Strix, this should be free reign for Mandrake. They've already got 60%. They're already moving up into the zone, and you can start to tell that I think Barik is missing some of that sustain he used to have, GuhRVN. Some of these dashes just not quite as impactful as they once would have been, as frzgod comes back in to try and counter out Ares perfectly. Outlander there as well for a little bit of extra damage, and the Barik coming in to try and find some kind of touch here, GuhRVN, but this has been largely in control of Mandrake's the entire time. The Barik does come in and find some way to slow them down. I think even the Dome Shield committed as well to try and buy his team a little bit of time, but that's a double kill for frzgod. That will be enough for the cap as well, as Mandrake's on offense yet again.
And it's just, I mean, it's been clean control, right? That was the mad scramble back to the objective, see what you can do, throw it at the wall, see what sticks, and it was a Dome Shield that paused things for a little bit, but nothing locked them down long enough. Triunfo, I like the call, but there's only so much you can do. Maybe you pause that ult and try to use it for a defense coming around this round, because now you're seeing what happens when you do get to open up this objective with a winning fight. And it's a lot of control. I mean, 50% in 30 seconds is already a huge push compared to what Mandrakes were able to accomplish last round.
You're right. They're going to get a couple of cracks at this archway and trying to get past as a couple of good kills come in from Triunfo, lighten up the kill feed as Mittow, frzgod, and Kronsz add Dinttick to that list as well. That's going to be a full wipe in favor of Triunfo as they're just delaying this kill into Outlander. And remember, they started this push the same way they did last time with another inflame here from this Furia. I think they're really worried about getting stuck around that mid area in that open courtyard core, and they're willing to commit inflame to get past that and take a couple cracks at that archway.
I mean, against something like a Strix, I don't want to stand out in the open for as long as possible. I want to push him out into somewhere uncomfortable, because even here, you can see how long a line of sight he has to be able to kind of just get pot shots off to frzgod, where they have to get aggressive, dance around the walls a little bit more than they would like to just to get back to the payload. Luckily, Mandrakes have just been doing more damage as a whole, it feels like. I mean, good shots connecting from long range on the map. That's made it a lot easier for them to win these fights, poke down the members of Triunfo, and force them to fall back. It's just creating such an easy avenue back to the payload. Unfortunately, with frzgod going down there, they might not be able to win the fight now that they're here.
You're right. That's huge from Ares, actually, be able to get that kill into frzgod, but Mittow picking up the pieces with the double kill of his own. Of course, the Aspexy comes in and shuts that down with the Strix, makes it a double as Dinttick had nowhere to go. Easy shots for this Strix to be able to land, and that should be enough for all of Mandrakes to start falling behind. And Gore, what happened to all this time? Remember, after that initial mid-fight, they had so much pressure, they got to 50% with almost 2 minutes left, and now all of a sudden that time has started to dwindle away. They really might only get one decent push out of this.
They have that opportunity they can hold for an overtime, but well, not if your Cassie's going to get taken down in a moment like this, but they actually turn it around on GuhRVN. That's going to be huge for him. I mean, I don't want to call for an inflame to be popped, because if it doesn't go well for you, then you absolutely are going to be feeling it next round. But you're in overtime, you're coming up on the archway. This might be worth an ult or two.
We'll see what it is that Mandrakes decide to commit. Dinttick trying to find a way to push in on this left side flank, make life harder for this Maeve, and Ares takes a ton of damage. That's huge. Mittow was there with Dinttick, and they find the kill, but GuhRVN finds the shutdown on the Outlander. That's the sustain remove, but frzgod with a double gets rid of GuhRVN, as well as Aspexy in the backline. The Strix damage falls. Kronsz falls as well, and maybe Mandrakes can make this happen after all. GuhRVN is a lot of time left. It's going to happen in overtime, but they got this payload slowly creeping around the corner. and the touch finally comes in. It's GuhRVN who makes his way in first. A little bit of backup coming in for the Maeve as well, but Ares falls. They do get the kill in the Mittow. They take down Kronsz as well, so even though they got some close score, I don't know if they'll be able to clean it up. frzgod ends up falling too. Dinttick still trying to keep this fight going, as he's still actually on the actual payload fighting up against this Barik, but now Dinttick has fallen. That's enough for Triunfo to get the successful defense, but I feel like Mandrake's gave it a good run.
Yeah, they committed the seismic crash, and it looked like it was going to be the end. I thought 2 people get stunned out, and if the damage had just been maybe a little quicker, Triunfo would not have been able to get the touch in. But that's the scramble, the mad dash from that respawn area. The reason we always call it like the respawn proximity. You're 10 feet away from the objective. If you can just close that gap, then you're set. And I like the fact that Mandrake's kind of hold back. I think if they commit another ult, maybe they convert that, but then you start playing with the odds going into this round 3-1, right? You throw out the seismic crash, you see what you can do, then you hit pause, and you're like, all right, well, let's keep everything else out. We've got 3 caught 3s, a Wrecker 3, a couple of Havens coming out to make sure that that Strix isn't felt as much, that Ares isn't felt as much on the Maeve. Makes it a lot easier for Mandrakes to stay alive during this fight, keep the pressure up, and win this one, try to convert this 2-4 now into a 4-4 if they can grab the point and push it in.
Yeah, both teams are going to come into this next point fight. GuhRMiser with 4 ultimates in the chamber, and then Flame used at the very beginning of it to try and catch themselves an advantage. And frzgod making the most of it does find some good damage, even though none of them actually get converted to kills. But they'll take the point pressure they get instead. 27% built up already, and Triunfo kind of pushed to the back. But the accursed arm comes out, and Crimson can't do anything about it. GuhRVN falls as well. They do make frzgod pay for it, though. They end up losing their Androxus on the backside, but I think Mandrake's happy with this trade so far. The numbers still favoring them, and they're starting to dwindle even further now as Ares drops as well. That's one for Kronsz on the Inara to shut down one more, make it a double kill. Don't see that a whole lot as even the Barik falls. Mittow there to clean up the last bit of damage, and Mandrake still control.
And they just get aggressive with it. This is what I love so much about this team, and honestly watching a lot of the top teams, but immediately they recognize, wait, we've got them on the run, let's go ahead and push up. They move 10 feet forward, they win the next fight, they keep going in. It forces Ares to do something like that. He has to go in for the touch, but you're just trading your life for it at that point.
Yeah, really not much chance of delaying this capture from happening, Gore, and that's now 3 mid-fights and 3 wins and 3 caps for Mandrake University. I mean, as good as this defense has been from Triunfo, you just cannot win the game that way. They're going to have to show us, if they can defend here, that they can turn a mid-fight around and try and do something different. And there has been a frzgod tax for Maeve, man. Ares has not easily been able to make his way in to a single fight yet without paying like 50% of his HP.
Yeah, that's, again, it's just the glory of the hit scan damage that frzgod's going to be able to pump out. The same thing could be said for Mittow. I mean, I haven't been talking about him a whole ton, but sitting on this Cassie, he's just going to be a steady stream of damage. That being said, Ares is just picking kills up left and right now. I just wish he had been able to do so, 2 minutes ago when it was very important for the team. Now it's just how long can we delay this 2.5 minutes, and can we keep up enough to force this to go to 3-3?
And can they hold on to resources for that next fight, too? Because it's going to be so critical that they're able to come in equipped. There won't be any second chances. And so far, the first 3 chances they got, the mid-fights really have not been particularly favorable for them. They really have not even been close, GuhRMiser. Triunfo have been struggling to find any kind of touches in reasonable fights around those mid-fights at all. So Mandrakes, I think, even though they're going to be going in 3-3, probably can feel pretty good about the way their point fight has gone so far. As so far, Triunfo have had dominant control. They're pushing all the way on the Mandrake side of the map and then pushing them even further back. Forget this push happening. Can they even make it back out to where the payload's at as Ares finds a double kill in the backline? They force a defensive in Flame from Furia. That's huge, GuhRMiser. They might not have that back up.
Yeah, full press defense. Keep them back as long as you can. It's going to take them some time to get back to the payload, and then even more time to try and push it forward. What? I don't even know what percentage to call that. 10% that they've moved it forward? I mean, it's just outside of the base. And so you're going to be able to push this up the hill. You can do this in 30 seconds. You can keep it in overtime. But Triunfo just had a successful defense as you were coming out prepared to fight. Now you're back in their territory. They have the high ground. They're going to have control. It's just feeling like a good defense, but the problem, like you had highlighted, is how well can they translate that style of play to the next mid-fight if they are able to find the defense here?
Yeah, it has not worked for them yet as Dinttick tries to get in and shut down this Barik. Not quite able to do it, though. Doesn't have the damage. Meanwhile, this is trouble for Mittow as he gets locked down. Ares gets to the back line. Jenos and Aspexy were there, too, on the Strix to make life hard for him. And I don't know, Gore, that this is going to happen. Not losing frzgod here as well with the overtime already ticking. Triunfo might be able to find a third defense here as the Inara tries to cling to life, but Kronsz can't make that happen either. The overtime ticks down, and with the full 3-3, we make ourselves to one more mid-fight.
I think we're seeing one Ares, for some reason, just seems to be a completely different player when he's on defense than when he's on this mid-fight. And I think it might be the pressure coming from frzgod, or maybe lack thereof, around this defense. I mean, even in this fight, a triple kill comes out. There's no frzgod to be seen. But it also has to be said, especially Strix on this map is going to not necessarily be weak around the mid-fights, but that's not his strongest point. You put him on defense, again, it's a nice, long, wide-open area where you have to be vulnerable. He's just going to plug you for free damage. I think Aspexy's been able to pick up on that a lot for this, helping find Triunfo's defenses. But again, that's something I want to see translated. Find a good position here and get some good damage on this mid-fight, or else your team, even though it's hard fought, is going to still be at a 1-0 deficit after this match.
Oh, this could be big here if Ares is able to find this kill into frzgod early, and he gets some help coming out from Scooter, and they shut him down. frzgod's been the thorn in their side in these mid-fights for Miser the entire game long here on Ascension Peak, and maybe they can shut it down, but Mittow gets the return kill, but yet again Scooter there to shut him down. So they lose Mittow and frzgod early on, and Triunfo for the first time might have positioning. The seismic crash comes through, and frzgod right there to follow up. They've got the Inflame there as well, and frzgod shuts down GuhRVN. Maybe this doesn't work as well for Triunfo as I thought, as frzgod gets another. That's the Jenos. I think with only his second death of the game, Scooter falls as well, and they can't get the kill from Aspexy either. Somehow Mandrake's dragged that one back from the brink.
frzgod said that if you kill me now, I will only come back more powerful, and then did it. And just decided to wipe everybody. It was well played, well-timed ultimates from Mandrakes. They managed those resources perfectly, and now they're still in control. Overtime's going down, but I don't know if there's a chance for Triunfo.
It's going to be difficult. They've already forced in the Barik for some kind of touch just to keep the overtime going. But how do they make their way back in? The Ruckus takes up the mantle. GuhRVN does get the kill in the Mittow, but frzgod has found one. Owtlander a second. And now they don't have Aspexy for the overhead damage. They don't have the Barik here for the touch, and Mandrakes get all 4 mid-fights in a row, even with 3 defenses showing up for Triunfo, and close this game out.
I think it just comes down to the fact that you were playing well, and even at the end there, it looks like if you're Triunfo, you have a pretty good grasp on the situation. Yeah. But you invest maybe too much to go to the back and kill off frzgod, and that left everyone else on Mandrakes in a good position to just rotate around, find themselves a lot of percentage on the point, but some safety around you that by the time you come back, cool, well, here's a seismic crash, here's an inflame, here's frzgod back from the dead. Like, they just set up perfectly for that last fight. But I'm going to keep saying it as it is. I think 127,000 damage there from Aspexy is great. 98,000 from Ares is perfect. But it didn't translate into kills as much as frzgod's 105,000. Like, his poke and then, I guess, high kill potential was there the entire time. This guy played the Andro exactly the way it was needed for this team to open it up.
You're right, man. And Gore, what I think we're really realizing now for Mandrakes going forward is how important Mittow is as that sort of secondary damage dealer, as that two-headed snake, right? frzgod, if he's going to earn that much focus, like we saw in that final mid-fight where they're diving all the way past Scooter and Ares both to make sure they shut him down, then Mittow has to do exactly what he did, which is find a couple return kills on the back of that. There's going to be space for him to operate, and I think for Mandrakes going forward, that's going to be a real critical piece of how successful they are. It's how well Mittow can sort of be that secondary guy for this team behind frzgod.
Yeah, it's definitely going to have to kind of pick it up. Mittow it's again, one of those things, very quiet but successful game for him, if that makes sense. Which is not necessarily the worst thing for your Cassie. I think, you go back in history and you'll see a lot of teams like their Cassie's on their hard carry, and she's either 20-5 or 5-20. Like, she's either getting everything that you want done, or she is getting targeted and singled out. I think having a game where it's just like, you know what, Cassie just exists in this realm, gets some damage down, but it's that guy over there who's actually getting all the kills.
It looks like Triunfo don't want to have to deal with that Androxus from frzgod again
I don't
after
blame
that
him.
last game. And you know what? Dinttick, we didn't give him a whole lot of credit, but he was pretty high up there on the damage charts as well on that Ashe last game. He had a pretty strong performance too. So they're going to try and take those two off the table here and force Mandrakes to adapt and play with something different, as well as the Buck and Rom ban, just like we saw in game 1. That does mean, though, Gore, the Khan makes it through, and Triunfo happy to first pick it.
Yeah, that's on Serpent Beach as well. I think this is a very solid map for Khan. I think it's going to work out well for him. The question I have is what they can stack around him, because Khan, he's not going to get it all done by himself. I'm also interested to see Mandrake's itemization, because resilience helps handle Khan, right? It doesn't cut him off, it doesn't counter him, it just kind of helps put him over here and say, all right, if you're going to grab me, if you're going to use that Vortex grip, at least I can get out of it a little faster and try to turn it around. You get that Maeve, you get the Barik. I think both of those champions are going to be adept at helping corral that Khan.
This is already, though, a beefy front line, though, for Triunfo. I mean, the Terminus, we already talked about how well he can handle tanking and buying so much time for the squad Khan as well. Then you add in the Furia to keep everyone healed up, potentially drop some inflames as well. And this is going to be a difficult team to try and get past. Mandrakes, though, have their own squad for it with the Maeve and the Evie, this sort of double flank now composition could, on a map like Serpent Beach as well. That could be tough to deal with.
And they are in a perfect position to grab an off-tank if they want an off-tank, flex over to triple DPS if they really want to. It's a great spot to leave open for that counter pick. And so I'm looking at them, and you take away what I would argue not necessarily are two strong picks for Ares. Maeve is absolutely one of the strongest champions Ares can play. Vivian is actually, I would argue, maybe number 2 on that. But the two strongest flanks outside of maybe Buck and Andro on Serpent Beach are on Mandrake's University.
You're exactly right, and it is going to be the triple DPS indeed, as they add the Lian to go along with this composition, so it'll be the Barik handling all of those point-tanking responsibilities for him, and everyone else is here to just drop some damage here for Mandrakes. A lot of responsibility in this Jenos as well, too, though, to try and keep this squad topped up, GuhRVN. But this is scary now. I mean, I just talked about how Triunfo had a ton of beef on this front line and how potentially their backline might have a ton of space, but now I feel like they're going to be working to kind of stick together because there's so much kill potential from Mandrakes all the time.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they adapt to this. I think Khan, if he can breach over to the back line on Mandrakes, is going to cause a lot of distress, because that's just going to be free serving up kills for Cassie and Vivian. But he's got to get back there, which is going to be very difficult. 1, maybe 2 wreckers on the side of Mandrakes. I wouldn't be surprised to see it potentially go into someone like Lian. It means Khan's not going to have that shield up for long, and he is going to get pushed out pretty hard.
They should be able to break through those shields relatively well, as we are going to be moving on to Serpent Beach here, GuhRVN. And I guess just talking about this triple DPS strategy a little bit more in general, because I feel like we are starting to see a bit more of it just from everyone, not specific to the region. We see it in North America, we see it in EU, we're seeing it in Brazil here as well. Just what is the real strength, I suppose, of this type of draft?
Well, so what we used to have was teams would run, 2 tanks, 1 main tank, 1 off tank, 2 DPS, 1 support, right? And we still see that a lot. In fact, that's what Triunfo's running right here. And that's always going to be adept when you're looking for it. Like, you typically have a strong backline. They stand off to the side, look for some damage. The healer focuses on them, as well as your main tank. And then the off tank and the flank go off on the side and try to push forward. This kind of composition for Mandrakes allows Maeve to go up one side, Evie to go up the other, and then Lian can focus whichever one she wants. And it's going to cause a distraction factor for Triunfo. They have to figure out where they want to go to, or they won't be able to save everyone, and it leaves someone like Ares out to dry.
And Ares falls early on. That Vivian feels a bit like a sitting duck with all this mobility on the side of Mandrakes, already to a 36% lead, and had the numbers advantage as the Vivian slowly making her way back into the fight. frzgod, though, buys some time, as Evie's so adept at doing, and even gets in some good poke as well to further create space and force GuhRVN back. Scooter as well, struggling to try and find his way in. And the Barik, cool as you like, just chilling on the point, racking up the percentage. Scooter comes in and ends up getting caught, shut down by Dinttick on the Lian, who was playing the Ashe last game and put up decent damage, so could certainly do some good damage here as well. frzgod finds Ares, and Dinttick continuing his battle up top. The overtime now ticking. Is GuhRVN really the only one that can make his way in? The shield's buying him some time, but not enough Gore, as his eventual death comes in quickly. A double kill for frzgod, and Mandrakes roll over Triunfo on the first fight.
My favorite game with Mandrake's University over the last, I guess 5 weeks, depending on how you want to look at it, like through qualifiers and through these first 2 weeks that we've played, is playing a game of which one is frzgod gonna play, right? When you've got 3 champions that he's really adept at. Because sometimes they haven't been putting him on this Evie, and, you know, you always get to see, like, when he plays Lian, you see, okay, yeah, you kind of want him on Lian. You see him play Maeve, and you're like, yeah, you kind of want him on the Maeve, or you want him on the Andro. But sometimes you just get that fresh reminder of how good he is at Evie, and this is just a showcase.
Yeah, it is. frzgod tearing through Triunfo right now. What happened to this defense? They never got their feet set, Goran. Mandrake University have stepped on the gas. Everyone on the squad streaking at this point, and they got a couple of ultimates in the tank as well if they need them to get around this final choke point. Mittow in decent positioning, but has to retreat. This might finally be that bit of a slowdown that Triunfo needed, right? I mean, obviously they have the defender's advantage. They're right back in, but they do lose GuhRVN. Mittow ends up falling. So does Dinttick, with a couple members dropping on the side of Mandrake's. Maybe finally some breathing room now here for Triunfo as Ares finds a double. Even Kronsz falls as well. So they finally find a way to slow things down.
That was quickly developing as a, wait, how much damage can frzgod make up for? Like, you lose one of your 3 DPS, it's not the end of the push. You lose 2 of them, you're looking to fall back. But, like, for a second there, it felt like Freeze wanted to keep fighting. Like, they wanted the trio to be all that lasted there. And then they kind of figured out better. You lose Barik, everyone falls back, just tries to play and wait as they come forward up here. I mean, they have to break this last corner, but you've got 40 seconds to win a fight. You've got 2 champions that can get onto the high ground easily and retake some of it and get some backline kills. I mean, this is a good draft for Mandrakes to find a solid push. They just have to find that opening kill.
And who is it going to be? I thought for a second Mittow might have had Ares as a nice stun lands over the wall to slow down the path from frzgod, but Mittow couldn't quite get to the Vivian, so frzgod takes up the mantle and Owtlander lands a 6-shot off of perfect communication coming out from frzgod, doing the dive. They get to the backline for Scooter as well to shut him down. They do find the kill on the Kronsz, but they lose Aspexy as well on the Cassie. He ends up falling. The Furia pushed all the way into the back, and whose job is to stand on the payload? There's no one to stop, and Mandrakes win the point fight and the push.
And this is one of my favorite things to highlight early on, but just now ticked up to 100% there for Scooter. He did not get his ult for that first round. He's going to have it now and available, but that's how long Terminus' ult takes to charge when you're not getting anything done as Terminus. It takes forever. I mean, minutes at a time that have been coming forward to him. But it's just so much to deal with. I mean, you've got Ares up on the damage charts right now, but it's because he's the only one who's finding a lot of retaliation. GuhRVN's been able to go in, get some grabs, set up some stuns. Ares will then follow up with a lot of damage, and he's gotten 5 kills for himself. But when you're looking at him being less damage than the Lian, which is trailing, what, 10,000 behind the Evie, it's just too much from Mandrakes, I think, for them to handle, and they don't necessarily have what they need to do so. I think if you trade out this Vivian or this Cassie for a flank, then maybe you're in a better neighborhood right now.
Well, there's exactly what you were alluding to. GuhRVN was finding some good pools. They dropped the Inflame there as well, and that costs frzgod his early life. We saw a bit from the itemization, some of what that steamroll can do. I think there were 3 caught 2s on the side of Mandrakes, and I think even a double wrecker there for Dinttick on that Lian. Couldn't quite see, but he'll have a chance to top it up if it wasn't, as he just gets shut down. Ares finds himself a double kill. frzgod does get the return kill into Ares, but this has been much better from Triunfo. They commit a couple of ults right at the start of this fight to try and break the rhythm up from Mandrakes. Aspexy in some trouble as well, but Mittow can't find those last few shots. He gets pushed off. Crimson gets the kill credit for that. Triunfo, after getting punched in the mouth of that first fighter, right back into it, and there's the ultimate you were looking for from the Terminus as he's right back in to keep fighting and push back the rest of Mandrakes.
And that reanimate's going to be huge. It keeps them around, and it allows them to get a turnaround kill. The fact that they got rid of Maeve, Midnight's one of the best ways to re-engage on the point, but now they're too staggered to want to use it. This is the issue with 3 DPS. You lose your tank, who's going to go stand and contest?
Well, maybe you just get a bunch of kills. Mittow and frzgod both shutting down 2. That is Ares taken out of the situation, but Mittow and Dinttick end up falling in return, so maybe they can't make anything happen. But Kronsz finds a couple kills. The Barik's right back in, and Mandrakes with 99% built up for Triunfo are the ones building up percent now. And who's going to find this touch for Triunfo with Freeze moving into the back line to complete the zone? Gormizer, that's heartbreaking if you're Triunfo, and suddenly it's been 3 in a row.
I think what you have to go there is there's nothing Triunfo can do. That is Mandrake's having the power of two flanks that with such high mobility. Maeve gets a touch, frzgod gets a touch. Like, they just keep overtime going. You've got maybe two of the best, like, overtime keepers outside of, like, really old, super long and busted Zhin. That it doesn't exist now for a reason because of how long he could do things like that. So really solid play from Mandrake just to keep that going for them more than anything. I mean, it wasn't 99%. You're a slip of the keyboard away from completely missing that and being on defense right now. And instead, you're looking to come around that last corner one more time for a potential 4-0.
You're right, man, and that was a lot in favor of Triunfo to be able to find that cap, and they couldn't do it. GuhRVN, though, has continued to find these really nice pulls. We saw a while back he found a good one on the frzgod to take him out, but you can hardly tell from the way the momentum is swinging back around. frzgod lighting up the kill feed along with the rest of Mandrakes, as there's barely anyone left standing on the side of Triunfo, so they'll make up from some of that extra push they weren't able to get earlier on the back of the fight right after the mid-fight. They end up losing. frzgod able to recognize everybody back up, get some good damage, but comes back to the team with the information. Payload is rounded this last corner, Gormize, and there are a bunch of ultimates in the tank for Triunfo, and I think there's nothing to save them for at this point. They have to make this defense happen, but Dinttick gets the kill on the scooter to shut him down. frzgod moves in close to Ares and shuts him down as well, and now that's left Crimson in the back line exposed. Can't find the last shot, but they don't need it. Mandrake's 4-0 taking over Serpent Beach.
And again, it's just well played. I don't know what else to say about it other than the fact that from top to bottom, they read the map. They drafted incredibly well for their team. And I think, again, that's where my big key point comes through. The double flank ended up helping them, primarily because there was no one on the other side to try and flank around them. But also, like, Kronsz going 7-3. I'll talk about the other guy in just a second. 7-3 on the Barik. There are a couple of those that were like some cleanup kills, but a very good performance on that solo tank. You have Maeve being able to control one side, get some touches, and then 15-3 for frzgod, almost 70,000 damage, being able to beat out the Lian, which is huge in games like this. Also being able to touch the objective, also not seeming to care at all when there's a moment where it's like, yeah, as Evie with 1,800 health, you shouldn't be trying to take that fight. It didn't matter to him. I mean, that was just frzgod flexing about as hard as he could. Man, it looked good.
And Gore, I think about how important that first push from Mandrake's was, because even when the team did eventually get stalled and it felt like they got fully wiped, they did not get the kill on the frzgod in that first push. He was able to keep that streak alive, find a couple more kills, maintain some positioning up near that front side, and then when the rest of the team got there, they were able to group up around him. It was just pushed like that, these small margins that just quite weren't able to be overcome by Triunfo. And remember what we came into this set discussing. How close is Triunfo to Mandrake's? These are the two top teams. Is it 1A and 1B, or is it a 1 and 2 with a clear divide? And right now, with this 2-0 start for Mandrake's, it's looking like the clear 1 and 2.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of teams trip up at this point in time. Like, they'll get up 2-0 and then lose 2 maps, maybe win the 5th, or end up losing 3 maps altogether, although reverse sweeps are not something we get to see too often. But normally there's like a 3-3 somewhere in there, and technically we got one, but there's a more convincing 3-3 where they're capturing the objective. Right now, I think if I'm Triunfo, I'm trying to figure out what map do we think we can control this on, and how do we change this draft to make frzgod feel uncomfortable. It's not an easy task because he's got so many champions, but if you can take him down a peg, then you can start dealing with the rest of the team too.
Yeah, I think it's tough when you have not won a mid-fight all set to find a way to win, because that's the only thing you have to do to win a game, right? Is got to win at least one of those. So, unfortunate Triunfo, but they've got a lot they can try and work on and improve. Maybe picks and bans is that thing, but it'll be a quick break. We'll come right back with game number 3 and beyond after that. Thanks for sticking with us here at the PPC. We're still in Brazil in the middle of our set between Mandrake's University and Triunfo, and so far, Gore, Triunfo has been getting a little bit outclassed in this set. Mandrake's, I think, did it with brute force in set 1 and a really nice performance from frzgod on the Androxus. And then with just the better draft in game 2 on Serpent Beach, it was so much pressure, and Triunfo never had a way to get out from underneath it.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to maybe dissect where that one went wrong, but I think a big portion of it starts in the draft. I think the fact that Maeve and Evie go to one side, you don't have a flank on your side, Andro and Buck were banned out, so you maybe didn't have as many options to go to if you're Triunfo there. letting those slip through definitely ended up hurting you. And I think that's more Mandrake's recognizing what's going to be the strength in the draft, which is more or less, let's try to shut down Ares early on. One of the biggest weaknesses he's had as a player is that even though he's incredibly good at the champions he has, it's a smaller pool than you're going to have in some other areas. So you can ban and pick away from him a little easier than you can from someone, say, like frzgod, who has the Andro, the Evie, the Maeve, the Lian, and so on and so forth.
And we saw it in that last game, right? That even with just the one lone tank that they had, some of those flankers were able to make up a little bit by finding some touches. But what do we always say, Gore? When you need to slow a set down, there's no better place to go than Ice Mines. Now, I think that might be slightly less true than it used to be. I feel like some of these teams have kind of got a bit more used to playing Ice Mines and found some ways to win. But on the defense, you really can slow these games down and maybe get something closer to what we saw back when Ascension peak here in terms of for Triunfo instead of that 4-0 stomp.
Yeah, it's this is the slowing ground, right? Like, this is the, okay, look, we just got 4-0'd. We just trudged through the snow for a little bit and calm down, and then we'll figure out what's up right after that, right? Where it's just like, let's give us a moment where we can counter out everything. But the biggest issue I have with this map, as much as I think a lot of teams have figured it out, is when you go to it as a map 3, it feels like you're grasping at straws at that point. Like, going to a map 3 Ice Mine, in my mind, is almost the equivalent of saying, okay, we've lost this set, but at least we can try to take one map away from you and hope for the best out of it. We have seen teams equalize here, and that's definitely not a statement that I think covers everybody, but it does kind of feel like that, okay, you've truly won this, we just don't want to go out like that bad, you know?
I mean, and there is some value to the plus minus as well, right? So I mean, I somewhat kind of understand that mentality. As Mandrake's going pretty different from what we saw from them on Serpent Beach. They pick the Barik and the Inara right away. They're also going to grab the Viktor and the Ying to go along with that. And we have seen, I feel like, a bit more Ying here lately, and she's been able to be a bit flexible. I don't know if we're going to see that here. Very likely going to be the only support here for this draft, but her value has gone up, it's felt, as the Fernando comes out alongside the Ashe. I feel like Fernando, we really only see him on Ice Mines.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good spot for him. It's a similar reason to like Terminus's resurgence around Ice Mines. I think Terminus has been able to spread that to much more maps, many more maps, honestly. But Fernando, his Immortal on this map is really solid. Drogo's is also a pretty big pick on this map, so if you're like trying to counter pick, that's a really good ult to have in your back pocket. It can save pushes, it can save defenses, and more importantly, it saves mid fights. So I actually think Fernando fits really well here. I think there's a couple more he could maybe switch over to, but this is his map.
Well, there's Zhin as well coming through. And Gore, you and I were talking about this, I feel like last week, where he had not been, dramatically shifted or anything, despite all the value he used to have, and that we'd suddenly just been seeing a lot less of him. But now he is picked up with that guillotine as well. So that means the ultimate will be functioning essentially like an execute, unless something like heals or something comes through to prevent that in the middle. Yeah. But Gore, I mean, I do think that this Zhin should still get a lot of value here.
Yeah, and I think, again, Freeze is just showcasing another champion that he has that should look good. I think Bomb King's going to give him a run for his money, though. That's going to be the biggest matchup to keep your eyes on. If Bomb King's able to get back there and that Billow is not timed well enough, then you're going to be able to see Aspexy come out of this with a kill. Triunfo will then be able to kind of pivot that into a lot of control as he focuses on the objective. But Zhin's going to be able to play some different angles, and that's one of my favorite things about it, is the fact that this map, even though on paper it's pretty straightforward, and honestly there's not a lot of wiggle room, there's still just enough that teams can kind of change around their strategies and test things out.
And GuhRVN did a good job keeping Dinttick locked down there, but 27% built up for Mandrakes. I like that we're actually getting a point fight here, though, Gormize. A lot of the times on Ice Mine, one team can kind of get locked down before the fight even begins. Aspexy in a good spot now to start letting loose some damage, but it's frzgod. Who else that finds the first kill? Ares responds by taking care of Dinttick as well, and no one putting pressure on Aspexy, so the damage continues to fall. Dinttick and Kronsz end up falling, and just like that, Mandrakes have to give up a lot of their positioning, and this is where Ice Mines can be tough, Gore. Once you fall back to this position, it can be hard to push back through and ever get a touch.
Especially because all you really need early on is the tanks to get rid of, and once you've pushed them away, who's going to take their place? Now they're going to be able to fight back in, and a lot of these maps, maybe you have a chance for the DPS to show up, and that's exactly what this barrage is trying to do, show up and show up big. 90% is not something to scoff at, but Mandrakes are able to at least get back in and touch.
They are going to make Kronsz pay for it with some HP on the way in, but frzgod again finds GuhRVN and removes the Ash from this defense. They're able to get Scooter as well, and just when I was saying maybe Mandrakes would have trouble getting back in, they come back in full force, and now it's Triunfo whose tanks might not be up in time, so they're going to commit the King Bomb. They know they have to find a way to make it back in, because he's looking to find a big stun, gets to Dinttick and does better than a stun, but it doesn't help with the actual tap. Mandrakes grab the first point.
That's well played, I think, more than anything from the Barik to get back to the objective, open it up for the Inara to come in. And this is a really good fight back from Triunfo right now.
It is.
But I think when you want to like trail it down and maybe trace this to a pivotal moment, it's where does that King Bomb go? I think if he rolls at the point, there's a chance he's able to stun some people up, set up some kills, maybe from him or his team. But there's also that huge question mark of whether or not you'll make it to the objective, right? With all the damage they can dump down that Mandrakes has available to them, are you going to be able to live through the barrage that is thrown at you that fast? And, well, he took the call to go for the Barik. It ends up giving up the point, which I think is respectable, because now they can just get this push going, or this defense going, I guess, for them, which is to push Mandrakes back as far as they physically can. And it'll set him up for a point either way. Unfortunately, frzgod just seems to do the thing every time he needs to.
Almost finds a couple more kills, but Kronsz and Dinttick just barely beat him to finishing those kills off. And I think the calculus that was being made, I think it's Aspexy that's piloting the Bomb King, what he was trying to decide was, do I want to take like maybe a 20% chance that I can contest this point, or a much higher chance that I can set us up for a decent defense? And he ends up putting them in the better spot for a defense, but then frzgod does things like this, finding a really sick multi-kill to extend this push out for Mandrakes. Now they got a minute, you're rounding this next corner, but really when they start to get down to this next arch down there is when they get stalled out again. So it's a question of how much can they build up making it there, as frzgod goes right through to GuhRVN, basically an execute with that guillotine equipped, and shuts him down, gets a double kill as he makes his way to Ares too, and frzgod starting to open up some space. He's looking for Crimson, wants to try and take the support out of this one too, and very narrowly doesn't find the last few shots. So of course he moves in to right past Wrongs and shut down Crimson on the Jenos.
Now, this is one of those drafts for both of these teams that I think in a vacuum, we're looking at a 3-3. We're maybe still on the point fight right now, honestly. But mechanically, Mandrakes are just doing something different here. Kronsz going down for GuhRVN, though, is going to be able to make this a little bit easier for Triunfo. They will have GuhRVN back in time for a defense. But you need to find some kills, something to alleviate this pressure.
I don't know that they're going to be able to do it. There's no one to touch in Mandrakes now with 6 in a row if you include how dominant Serpent Beach was. And Ice Mine is supposed to be the exact opposite of this. And it's not just that it's Ice Mines, but Triunfo have kind of done everything the way that you'd want, right? They won the initial mid-fight. They had control. You're on Ice Mine. It's supposed to be hard for Mandrakes to make their way back in, but they forced their way past that. And then even when they lose the mid-fight, Gore, they establish a dominant position for the defense. And then frzgod just single-handedly decides to push past that. I think Triunfo are making a lot of the right decisions.
Yes. And that's the scary part, right? It's just they're playing well, they're making the right decisions, they've got a great draft, and then frzgod's on a 10-kill streak, right? Like, there's just some things that you aren't able to take away from them. He's got that COT 3 online now. You've got Morale Boost 3 there for Owtlander, which is not a death sentence as much as an Inflame, but you can expect to see a lot of healing getting pumped into the boys on Mandrakes way more often than they had before. And it just makes it even more frightening, I think, if you're Triunfo, because you're already on a slippery slope. You don't want this to be, the ice that ends up making it even slipperier, and then you end up falling all the way down. Like, it's just so difficult to overcome this mountain that is Mandrakes right now. And I'll be honest, Finch, this is so far, like, them being up 2-0, this is not at all how I saw today going. I thought this was going to get pushed. Maybe going like 1-for-1, and then one of these teams takes 2 maps at the very end, but this has just been dominant from Mandrakes. I expect to see more of the same here. I'm looking towards Aspexy and Ares to have to go big, or else things are just going to slip out of their hands.
You're right, they're going to need some big performance from this Bomb King in particular, I'm thinking, on this next fight. But Crimson
That's a good shot.
is the one that shows up, shuts down Mittow very early on with that ultimate, and maybe that can push Mandrake's back. The Inara in some trouble too, as Kronsz ends up falling. Ares does show up as you requested and finds himself a nice kill, and Mandrakes go all the way to the back, giving up a ton of positioning, and Triunfo are right back in it where they need to be, and this time much earlier with that comeback mechanic to help as well, so they're going to keep pushing right on in, further shutting down Mandrake's. Ares gets another kill. Aspexy shuts down Owtlander. And this, I think, is the first midpoint they're going to get all set.
I mean, it's going to be a great way to break that seal as well, right? It took a little while to get there. And again, I always put that asterisk. Whenever there's comeback mechanic involved, it's always like, okay, well, you got it this time, but we'll see how you're able to fare once it's maybe a little more normalized. But that amount of aggression was beautiful, right? Get up there, win the fight, push them back, and then chase them down. Do not let them regroup. Do not let them have that ability to feel comfortable in trying to find a push. Never let them even think about getting back to the point. Just make them think, how do we stop this onslaught? And that's what Triunfo do. They just get aggressive. They put in the work. Ashe going as deep. GuhRVN made a huge play there, which I think is the kind of backbone to opening that up and sealing the deal here. I think if you get more of that, then you're still in this set more than anything.
They really are, man. And again, that did also start with a great play by Crimson, right? Find that ultimate in the Mittow to give them the early numbers advantage, too. And Gore, I think that's a hard play to call when you've been getting this kind of outplayed, so to speak, so far. I mean, the set's been pretty one-sided in favor of Mandrake, so this all-out aggression can be tough. As Mandrake's now the ones trying to play some defense, and they have slowed Triunfo down a good bit. We're still around this midpoint where this fight's happening, so still Triunfo have not been able to regroup and start to make a push.
Yeah, it seems like Mittow didn't get enough mid-fight just because of how fast Triunfo were able to cap that and how much, well, I think he got taken down twice in that fight. And so he's kind of playing right now as if he's just around the mid-fight. Now they're going to get aggressive. And this is that slippery slope of ice mines more than anything. If you lose your grip on the payload, you get pushed back. And because of how far you have to run, all of a sudden their iron grip defense can go a little further. Like, you can get full pressed much more than any other map here, and you can get held at bay. This doesn't have to be a base. Yes, you're still technically close enough to be able to get to the payload, but you have 30 seconds to make a 3/4 of this push, and you're doing it at 4/5 of your full power right now. It's just a difficult fight to take here if you're Triunfo.
Yeah, you're putting yourself into a position now where if you cannot find this defense, you're going into this next fight with Mandrakes on map point, right? It's scary now all of a sudden for Triunfo if they're not able to make this one work. So they're going to keep pushing forward. Crimson apparently got some kind of vendetta up against Mittow. He's found a couple of really big kills on him on this fight as well. So it'll be overtime if this push happens at all. But Gore, I think they're moving into the hardest part of Ice Mine to try and get past when you're on the offense. They've got 4 ultimates, though, in the back pocket, and GuhRVN goes in aggressively trying to buy a little bit of space. Does get barrel stuff, but I think this is good for GuhRVN. He's managed to create some space, get some decent damage out as well. frzgod's the one that's low. So is Kronsz, as Ares gets the kill on the Mittow, who has struggled here these last couple of engagements on the Viktor and has been getting picked off. Aspexy has decent positioning up top. It started raining into Bomb King damage as well, but frzgod has found GuhRVN. Outlander drops, though, and that's the healing, but frzgod now gets a second as Scooter falls as well. Mandrakes do find the defense, and it's 3-1 moving into the next mid-fight.
And it's, even though you're taking down Mittow, he's able to respawn and come back, right? It's just those moments when you're on defense. It took maybe too long for Triunfo to get there, and the longer you're holding in overtime, the faster it's going to tick down, so you have very little wiggle room to work with it. The thing I like is that they only commit the Immortal to be able to try and save that. Scooter does drop his ult, which maybe you don't want to see that at all, but they force it for Outlander and frzgod to drop theirs, and Dinttick for that matter. So a 1-for-3 trade going into the mid-fight is beautiful for them. You've got Aspexy with a King Bomb, Crimson coming into this with a through time and space, as well as GuhRVN, who I would argue was the reason they win that last fight, with his ult available to kind of slam that down. Yeah. I'm expecting a lot more out of Triunfo this time around because of the ult advantage and the comeback mechanic. Just play it like you did last time. Don't be afraid to get aggressive.
A lot of eyes on Aspexy as well as Crimson, who managed to find some big shots last time. There's one of the few ultimates Mandrake still had in the back pocket, though, for the barrage. Looks like, though, he didn't really fire much. Still has the ultimate chilling at 42%. Looking for frzgod in the back, though, as Aspexy. This is big positioning that he's been able to find. Takes care of Owtlander. Can't quite get the kill on the frzgod, but GuhRVN's there to follow up. Mittow now in some trouble as the double kill comes through. And GuhRVN, you asked for a bit more aggression from Triunfo. Well, how is that?
I mean, that's exactly what I wanted to see, although they're not playing this the same way they did last time. Last time they won that fight, and then they were halfway down the hill ready to fight off Mandrakes. Now they're giving up a little more room. It's because GuhRVN already used that Assert Dominance. Doesn't have it to be able to come back in and try to open up the door. King Bomb's going to get channeled, though, and that might be enough to really seal this one where it was.
Yeah, they've got this cap going up too high. No way for anyone to make it in. I think that was frzgod trying to force his way in for a touch, and Crimson lines up another shot in the Kronsz. Mittow falls as well to Aries. Suddenly the kill feed starting to light up a bit as Mandrakes, I think, were scattered looking for a desperate touch and all that, and Triunfo not only getting that cap, but now they have a chance to make a decent push to get some positioning, to get out in front and try and buy themselves a little bit of extra space on this map. Mandrakes now starting to give a bit back to this Triunfo team.
I mean, this is what this draft should be doing in essence. I mean, this is part of the reason you pick some of these. It's the question mark of whether or not you can get Fernando Ashe to work out, but again, on Ice Mines, I think that's going to be really good for them. It gets them aggressive, it gets them up in the face of Mandrake's University, and it allows this Bomb King with a Luminary behind him to just deal so much obnoxious damage that there's not much you can deal with. I mean, what is that, 1035 that I think I saw him hitting there for? So regularly, that's a 2-tap on most of these champions. And otherwise, it's a, hey, Fernando, could you get a fireball in their vicinity? And it will just skim the last little bit of damage needed to find the kills. Unfortunately, it's just kind of not necessarily all on one, but it feels like they aren't fully functioning as a team right now, like a little bit of spaced out, not quite the communication we've seen around some of these mid-fights, and this payload's not moving as far forward as it feels like the rest of the team wants to.
That's true. I talked about how Triunfo were able to push forward and find decent positioning, but Mandrake's found some critical response kills of their own. GuhRVN now in trouble. Kronsz able to clean that one up quite nicely. This could be a big battle, though, if Aries is able to find a couple of shots on the frzgod, who thinks better of that engagement, instead falls back. And Gore, you hit on this last time. Once you give up that payload, like being around and actually making the push, it can be hard to get back onto it on Ice Mines. frzgod and Dinttick showing them exactly why, taking down Scooter and Aries yet again, picking apart this offense from Triunfo. But the thing is, Mandrakes are not going to be able to win this way, right? They're going to have to come back and get a couple, or take another crack at that next mid-fight yet again.
Yeah.
Triunfo, though, just trying to buy themselves some time to get back in and maybe have another mid-fight.
The worst part about this map right now for Triunfo is the fact that even though they get multiple chances to come back in and win it, they are giving Mandrakes, I mean, just one mistake is all it takes for Mandrakes to be able to win this around the next mid. With 4 seconds left, I don't see anyone being able to break this hold. And so you're looking at a comeback mechanic that's 4% every other tick just because you're down by 1 point here. And you're going to have to make it work. You're going to have to see GuhRVN get aggressive, and he's going to have to make plays like this more often and maybe even more aggressive, which is hard to imagine being able to say because of how aggressive that was in itself. But, I mean, he's 4-12. He's making space for the team. Aries and Aspexy are the ones that need to kind of be able to pick up right behind him, find some of these kills. Last round, you had ult advantage, you had comeback mechanic, you had aggression in your favor. This time, you have one ult offline for Mandrakes that is more important than the ult you have offline for Triunfo. Not having Outlander's ult is huge, but he's also got Morale Boost 3, so don't worry about him being able to charge it up. You're going to have to play carefully, but still zone them out the way that you have these last few rounds. And I don't know. I'm looking towards where this Viktor and Zhin go, how frzgod's going to be able to retaliate against GuhRVN to see if they can open up that space.
Yeah, I think GuhRVN's been really that critical piece so far for Triunfo. I know that it's been a lot of Aspexy's damage on this Bomb King, but he's only been afforded those opportunities because of the space GuhRVN has been manufacturing, and he's going to work yet again on this right side. They've already got Dinttick low, but the barrage is the response coming out from Mittow on the Viktor, and does find some decent damage, but yet again, Aspexy has found this spot that he loves to sit in, shuts down Kronsz quite nicely. And Gore, something has changed. The tipping point has been reaching. Triunfo now starting to win these mid-fights a lot more consistently, and there's the assert dominance. Does find some decent stuns as well, and King Bomb being charged from Aspexy as well. They're willing to commit these ultimates. They know the most important thing isn't the push, it's winning these mid-fights, and they're trying to keep Mandrakes on the back foot.
But unfortunately for them, the tanks are still able to get a touch. He was so focused on the Zhin, wasn't paying attention to the Inara. Outlander's out of there, though, so there's no healing right now for Mandrakes unless that ult is available, and I don't think he just used it, so he's not going to be able to have that for here. So Dinttick, Mittow, all going to get taken down.
Yeah, and this should be that overtime ticking through. I think frzgod the only one that's in the vicinity, so yet another capture, and Gore, we're asking for a closer, more back-and-forth match. Well, how do you get more back-and-forth than 2 3-point swings in either direction? Mandrakes do it first, and then Triunfo on the brink of disaster, of being swept, respond back with a 3-0 push of their own. It's just a question of, I don't even know if it is a question of can they cap here, can they get the successful payload push, or is this really already all about the next midpoint fight?
No, I think this is still going to be coming through. I mean, 2 minutes left. It's been a rough time to be able to get this push, but you're kind of on a roll. Mittow gets a kill onto Ares, though, and that's going to start to slow this down. And it's those little moments, specifically because of this angle that Mittow's being able to hold, just long lines of sight, hit scan, burst mode, Viktor. It all kind of lines up to being successful there for Mandrakes. But when you find trades like that, when you have someone on the side of Mandrakes being able to find, I wouldn't even argue a crucial pick, but just a solid pick up against that Cassie, Ares just doesn't have the same potency right now on these pushes that we've seen around the mid fights. And if he's able to come in, maybe sweep a kill onto Mittow or sweep a kill onto frzgod, that will open this back up. But man, Ice Mines giveth and Ice Mines taketh away. You lose one fight, look how far back they're pushed already.
You're exactly right. I mean, I think that when you were saying that it looked like a decent push, that was a full minute ago, and Triunfo were set to try and make a push. I think you're exactly right. It's just that some small things can go wrong, and suddenly the entire house of cards comes tumbling down. Dinttick gets one more kill onto Ares, and Kronsz, buying time in the corner, gets some crucial healing coming through as well, and suddenly Mandrake's still standing. They get a kill into Aspexy as well, and this is all the way on the attackers' side of the map. Mandrakes have pushed entirely onto Triunfo's side and have them pushed back, so things are starting to feel a bit out of reach on this push now. It's not just a question of getting back to the payload, but then back to the payload in 30 seconds and making a push entirely in the other direction. Ares does find a one critical kill, though, onto this Inara. It's a lot of the frontliner move, but Mittow, as always, finds the angles, finds the shot, and shuts down the Bomb King. Even Ares has to fall back.
Now, you know, your question was, is it really just do we look at the next mid-fight? Yes, at this point you're looking at the next mid-fight. I just don't think that Triunfo are going to be able to find some sneaky way back there. If this was like those moments where if you have like an Evie, maybe she slips through the back line somehow and is able to get to the payload and backdoor it, but right now you're coming into it, you save all 5 ults, Mandrake save all 5 ults. This is about as even footing as you get going into this fight. That's going to play, I think, even bigger of a role around here. Ares went huge around that mid-fight. Aspexy was able to throw his name in there, but I think Ares is showing up in ways that we haven't gotten to see this set so far. And I want some more of that. I mean, he's 17 and 15. I want to see him, like, keep the 15 where it is. Let's see that 17 get bumped up here. Focus Outlander, get rid of the healing, and then it makes it a lot easier to fall back and just dismantle the rest of Mandrakes.
Well, I feel like in these last 2 mid-fights, they haven't had Outlander's ultimate at the start of it, right? They did have it in the last fight, but he used it when they were already in pretty weak positioning. So I wouldn't argue
they were
that
already pushed out.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue they got max value out of it. So I think that that could be a pretty big deal here for Mandrake this time to be able to fight around that ultimate from Outlander in the right spot. But Crimson,
that's a good shot.
Time play, frzgod and Mittow. That's all the damage from Mandrakes. Take it out very, very early on. That's huge and could keep Triunfo not just here in Ice Mines, but in the set entirely. Kronsz falls as well as Ares comes in to shut down one more, and they are going to get aggressive. They still have the Assert Dominance in the back pocket and the King Bomb. What a huge play for Crimson.
I mean, sometimes that's all you need. The question is, how well can they hold on to it this time around? They still have the Assert Dominance. They still have the Immortal. But Ares and Crimson are gone. They've got no support. They don't have that boost. And with Aspexy gone, they lose a lot of their damage. Mandrakes have thrown out pretty much everything they had in their arsenal. So now it's almost back to basics for holding on to this objective. 63 to 36. It's going to be huge. GuhRVN gets a big kill in the backline.
You're right. Taking care of Mittow there is big. He'd already used the barrage solo up against the Fernando, I believe, though, so not a ton of value came out there. frzgod wants to try and see if he can stagger this death for GuhRVN. He does get it. If he can get back out and survive now, then that's huge. We're at 66 to 75, about as close a percent on your final mid-fight as you could ask for in this Triunfo that controlled the center. Even without their Ash at this point, the rest of Mandrake University are trying to bide their time, but when they're going to make their push, they're in now and in control of the center point and half percent building up in their favor now. So that's going to force Triunfo right back out. Aspexy ends up in the crosshairs, though. A Mittow Kronsz finds a kill too, and they've lost Scooter. This is desperation time now for Triunfo as frzgod gets Ares. GuhRVN falls as well, and Gore. It's been a long, drawn-out battle, but Triunfo can't get it done. It's Mandrake that stand victorious.
Imagine, like, man.
That's brutal.
You start that round off with a beautiful double kill from Crimson. And it just comes down to ult usage and where they're placed, how they're used to get that control. I think, again, you have GuhRVN holding off a lot of people. If someone's able to come up and maybe help him on that hill, maybe it's frzgod who goes down all of a sudden, and you're opening up the conversation for something different. But that was a good kill from them. Man, it's hard to argue. 19-11, that's a really good slash line, but 24-10 again for frzgod. He was very potent throughout that game. I think at the very end of it, using their ults wisely from Mandrakes gave them just such a huge advantage.
And the question I asked after Ascension Peak was, is Mittow going to consistently be able to be that secondary threat they need when there's too much pressure on frzgod? Well, how does 163,000 damage sound as a secondary threat in air quotes, right? I think Mittow was absolutely there for them this game. I don't know if the barrages were always getting the max value from them in that game, but he was doing plenty with that burst fire as we saw. And what about GuhRVN? I know that he didn't win this one, but can you do more as an Ashe on the losing team than what GuhRVN did that game? I feel like he played out of his mind.
No, I think if you're Triunfo, that was about as clean as you could get, right? There's maybe some small mistakes, but admittedly what it came down to was certain mechanics, and not even like every player. It came down to one moment Mittow has a really big pop off, and that's just going to change the fate of the game. Same thing for frzgod early on in this game that gave them that lead. And you had that a couple of times. Ares during that penultimate mid-fight was one of those players who just happened to pop off at the right time to be able to get a huge win for the team. Aspexy had some of those moments. Crimson had a huge ult.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there's only so much you can do. Like, and I say this all the time, it's consistency versus that pop-off potential. Pop-off potential can win you a game, but if you're popping off infrequently and it's winning you a couple of fights and they're just consistently slightly behind you when you're popping off, then when you're not popping off, they are so much further ahead of you. And that's kind of how it felt from Mandrakes. They just had control. Ice Mines definitely felt like it was starting to fall out of their hands, but they were able to keep it under wraps the entire time.
Well, that's a huge win for Mandrakes, not just beating Triunfo, probably their next closest competition, but beating them 3-0. That's going to be huge to the plus-minus. I doubt anyone else is getting a lot of wins against Triunfo, probably not 3-0 either, so that helps them a lot in terms of relative value. Looks like Rao were able to win their match, as were Hivemind, to round out Brazil for the day. Now, we still have North America Gormiger. There's plenty more Paladins coming down the pipeline, but I'm starting to think, man, this Mandrake University team, just like we thought, really might be head and shoulders above everyone else.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they're going to continue up, because as of right now, they are, yes, obviously in the lead, but I want to see how far they can take it. We have seen a couple of regions in the past between console leagues, minor leagues, whatever you want to look at, where one team just floors everybody and goes all the way to the top. Mandrakes kind of has that field right now. If Triunfo is, in my mind, the team that's going to give them the most trouble, and they take it as a 3-0, I'm maybe shaking if I'm anybody else there, because I don't know if we can keep up.
And I do want to give Triunfo some credit. They took Ascension Peak and Ice Mines all the way to that 7th point, right? It was only really on Serpent Beach. McFinch face, all right. It was only on Serpent Beach where they truly got outclassed, it felt like to me. So I think that this is something you can build on if you're Triunfo. I mean, they were only a couple away. I mean, because it was 90 to 99% at the end there too on that last one for Ice Mines. So you're that little bit, 10% away from being able to compete and still being in that setup against Mandrake. So I think that if you're on the side of Triunfo, you can see some positives from that tough loss.
Yeah, and so I'm looking forward. Again, this is the same thing I said last week. I'm looking forward to what these teams are going to bring going into and pretty much any matchup that's not Mandrakes, right? If we get to like watch them go up against Rao, if we get to watch them go up against Hivemind, like those teams, sure. I think we see a different Triunfo and we see maybe a different fate for them. But Mandrakes, I think this week absolutely confirmed it, are just a different beast to deal with. And because of that, it's going to be a lot more difficult to catch up for them. I think everyone in Brazil at this point is going to be looking towards them as the team to beat. And they have painted an official target on their back because of how far ahead they are. The hardest thing is just going to be playing that catch-up game.
It's going to be maintaining that consistency. I think that consistency from Dinttick and Mittow is going to be huge in this team going forward because they've both looked excellent throughout these first 2 weeks. They need them to keep that going. That's going to do it for Brazil. But like I said, we still have North America coming for you. So a quick break. We'll get that set ready for you.